Good morning once again. Good morning. I'm glad to be here. I'm really honored to be here. I want to talk with you this morning about something that is really rampant in our society, and I'm sure we're very familiar with that, and that is complaining. You heard her say that I've been featured all over the world. I've been on Oprah, all of that, and the thing is that I tried to figure out for many years why so many people were interested in this topic. I was teaching a class on prosperity in 2006. And what I noticed is that everybody says they want to be prosperous, but everybody complains about what they already have. Wayne Dyer said, if you're unhappy with what you've got, why would you want more? So what I decided to do was to help people extricate complaining from their lives. So I handed out these complaint-free bracelets. And the idea, which we'll talk about in a little while, is you switch it every time you complain. So I tried to figure out why me handing out 250 bracelets, then we go to 9,000 and 10 million, and it just has become a phenomenon around the world. And I figured it out. The reason is, number one, there's too much complaining in the world. If you agree, say yes. And number two, the world isn't the way we would like it to be. If you agree, say yes. Here's the point. The two are correlated. We are so busy complaining about and talking about and focusing on what is wrong, we are perpetuating what is wrong. Let me get very elemental as I talk about this, because we have confusion in our culture as to what is and is not a complaint. When a customer calls you up and is telling you about an issue that they have, that is not a complaint. That is giving you feedback. The dictionary defines complain as to express grief, pain, or discontent. Now, it makes sense on occasion for us to express grief, pain, or discontent, but what most people do is they complain all the time and they have absolutely no awareness of it. In my research, the average person complains, you ready for this? 15 to 30 times a day and has no awareness that they are complaining at all. I like to say complaining's like bad breath. You notice it when it comes out of somebody else's mouth, but not so much when it comes out of your own. So, it is not complaining if you speak directly and only to the person who can resolve the issue. That is a very important point. What most people do is they go to work and then they come home. They complain to their spouse about work, and then on the weekend they complain to their friends about their spouse, and they can't understand why their life doesn't get any better. I am not inviting you to shut up and suck up whatever the world sends your way. That is not about becoming a complaint-free person. A complaint-free person is a person who practices healthy communication skills. If you've got an issue with somebody, make sure you speak only to that person. Eckhart Tolle put it really well. He said, complaining is not to be confused with informing someone of a mistake or deficiency so that it can be put right. And to refrain from complaining does not necessarily mean putting up with bad quality or behavior. It's a good thing I know this slide, isn't it? There is no ego in telling the waiter your soup is cold and needs to be heated up if you stick to the facts, which are always neutral. How dare you serve me cold soup? That's complaining. That is the greatest distinction. Most complaining has a how dare this happen to me tone to it. How dare this happen to me? How dare this happen to the center of the universe? Which we are the center of our universe, right? I was speaking in Denver a while back. The driver picked me up at the airport. He took me to the hotel, and while he was driving me there, he said, "Oh, you're in luck." He said, "They have put you up in the nicest hotel in Denver." And it was really beautiful. And what I like to do is whenever I go to a city, drop my bags in my room, then I'll go for a walk, then I'll come back, work out. So I did the same thing that day in Denver. I was in and out of my room probably 8 or 9 times. Well, that night I go back to my room about 10:30 and I have a breakfast speech just like this. I want to get a good night's sleep. And I get ready to go to bed, but I hear this noise on the other side of my wall in my room, and the noise is going, boom, squeak, boom, squeak, boom, squeak, boom, squeak. It's not what you're thinking. Shame on you. I was on the 6th story of this hotel, and the building next door was 5 stories tall. And it had a big fan on the top. You've seen those big industrial fans on top of buildings, and there was a rusty spot on it. So every time it went around, boom, it hit the rusty spot. Squeak, boom, squeak. So what does the no complaint guy do in a situation like this? I went down and I talked to them at the front desk. I said, you're probably not aware of this, but there's a fan on the building next door, there's a squeak, and I'm having trouble sleeping. Would you mind moving me? They couldn't have been nicer. Now, in the past, I would have handled this differently, honestly. I would have called my mother. You're laughing because you do this. Can you believe this? Finest hotel in Denver. I'll show them. I'll stay in the room. And that's what we do. We stay in the room instead of telling the person who can actually do something about it. So let's talk a bit more about complaining. The challenges with complaining. People say, what's wrong with complaining? Here is the biggest problem with complaining. You're focusing on the problem. You're not talking past the problem. You're not talking about a solution. You're talking about what is wrong, and you're keeping your focus on the problem. One of my favorite stories, 2 construction workers get together for lunch one day. First one opens his lunchbox. He looks inside and goes, oh, a meatloaf sandwich. I hate meatloaf sandwiches. His friend's quiet, so the 2 eat lunch. Second day, first guy opens his lunchbox again, looks inside and goes, another meatloaf sandwich? That's 2 days in a row? You've got to be kidding me. His friend doesn't say anything. Third day, same 2 guys sit down to have lunch. First one opens his lunchbox, looks inside and goes, I've had it. I have really had it. Day after day after day, meatloaf sandwich. I want something else. And his buddy finally says, dude, why don't you ask your wife to make you something else? And the guy says, I make my own lunch. If you get nothing else from what I say today, let it be an understanding that you make your own lunch by the thoughts that you think, but evidenced by the words that you speak. So complaining keeps your focus, keeps your focus on the problem. It is also damaging to your health. There have been studies upon studies upon studies that have shown that people who complain about their health tend to have more health issues. Now let me clear up a myth here. Have you ever heard the idea, raise your hand if you've heard the idea that people need to vent. Raise your hand, please. This is a common myth. I am out to debunk this myth. It is a myth. People are not clothes dryers. Clothes dryers need to vent. Human beings need to process. Process means you talk to somebody else and say, here's my situation. What can I do to change? Venting is, I'm a victim and let me tell everybody about it. So complaining keeps our focus on the problem. It's damaging to our health. It is damaging to our relationships. In 1911, a psychologist tried to figure out why some marriages fail and one succeed. So which ones succeed? He found one common factor in the marriages that fail. Anybody want to guess? Complaining. That's exactly right. Complaining to the other person and complaining about the other person. And lastly, complaining limits career success. The higher up, the better the attitude. That has been my experience time and time again. I've gotten to know CEOs in corporations around the world, and the higher up, the better the attitude. I always joke and say, you're never going to see a help wanted ad that says, must complain frequently, because nobody wants people like that. If complaining keeps our focus on the problem, is damaging to our health, destructive to our relationships, limits our career success. But what I want you to know is why people are complaining. They have unmet needs, and in 9 years, by the way, I never set out to be this, but I am the world expert on complaining. I can say that because there's 10 books on the subject. I've written 2 and I'm quoted in 8. So people complain for only 5 reasons. The first, say it with me. Get attention. Get attention. People want to be noticed. It is an innate human need, not a want, not a desire. It is a need on the part of people. I once spoke somewhere, and afterwards we did a big book signing, and I was talking to the manager of the bookstore, and it's the biggest bookstore in Canada. It's a chapter store, and I said, "How does your store do so well?" And because it's amazing. He said, "I have a rule that whenever anyone comes within 10 feet, and we're dancing again, comes within 10 feet of one of my employees, we are to say to them, 'Hi.'" And he goes, "No, that's it. That's it." He said, "If you come into my store for 20 minutes, you will be greeted on average," you ready for this? 16 times. And I said, "My gosh, doesn't that make people feel like you're trying to sell them something?" He said, "We are trying to sell them something. We're a bookstore. We're just acknowledging the basic human need, which is G." Tell me what it is, please. Get attention. So what do you do if you've got somebody who's coming to you to get attention? You simply ask, "What is going well?" This is a magic phrase. When they come up and complain to you about other people, other situations, other departments, about their children, about their health, what's going well with your health? What's going well with your children? What's going well? What's going well? What's going well? Now, if you keep asking that question, one of two things will happen. They will either begin to tell you what's going well, or they'll quit talking to you, and either way you win, okay? So, what is going well? Tell me what the G in gripe stands for. Get attention. The R in gripe stands for? Let me hear everybody say it, please. Remove responsibility. This is when you give somebody a task and they start telling you all the reasons it's not going to happen. One time I was on a plane getting ready to fly to New York City to speak. I live in Kansas City. And it came time for my flight to leave, and it didn't take off. And so we sat there, and we sat there, and we sat there. Well, I'm watching Netflix, so I'm fine. I'm sitting there watching Netflix on my phone. Finally, the flight crew comes on, and because the flight crew wasn't even on the plane, didn't even realize that. And the flight crew came on, and the flight attendant announced that they were part of a crew that got in late the night before. They had to have an FAA mandated downtime, which they then had. Now, the funny thing was, everybody around me starts complaining. I'm thinking, I want a pilot who's well rested. You know? So we get on the plane, we go out onto the tarmac, the pilot tells us we're gonna be the next one to take off, we all get in our seats, and as we're sitting there waiting to take off, nothing happens. And I mean nothing happens, and nothing happens. And finally, the pilot comes on and goes,
ladies and gentlemen.
Have you noticed pilots do that, by the way? I think they teach them that in flight school. Everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've detected a situation with one of the generators. We're going to go back, see if we can get it fixed. We'll keep you informed.
So we go back. Now, what happens when he announces this? Everybody around me does what? Complains. You know what I'm thinking? I'm glad they figured this out on the ground. So we go back and we're sitting there and we're waiting and we're waiting and we're waiting. And this one guy who's seated about 2 seats over from me pulls out his cell phone. And this is the conversation he had. "Hi, it's me." "No, we haven't even taken off yet." Well, the flight crew got in late last night. The FAA requires that they have a certain amount of downtime, and so we're waiting to take off. They're here now, but they've discovered a problem with the plane. I don't know. I'll call you when I get there. I love you too. Bye-bye. Was that complaining? What was he doing? Stating facts, and facts are always neutral. The guy sitting in the seat in front of me, I guess, heard this other guy make his call, figured he needed to check in, pulls his phone out. This was his conversation. "No." Not even hello. "No." Well, the pilot, better known as Sleeping Beauty, got in late last night, and then they discovered a problem with this piece of junk airplane. "What's going to happen? Honey, I'm going to miss my connection." Well, if I miss my connection, I'm not going to get to see the client. This was my one chance. Well, Well, I guess we're not going to Jamaica this year then, are we? Look, I'll call you if I get there. Goodbye. Same question. Was that complaining? Yes or no? Yeah. Okay. Now, the funny thing is, not just a couple of minutes later, the pilot then comes on and says, ladies and gentlemen, we are really, we were sorry about all the delays. We're sorry about all the issues. He says, I've got some good news though. I have managed to arrange for connecting flights for everybody on board. And there was 200 people on this plane. He said, I've got connecting flights for everybody on board, except 2 people. And the guy, when he called the names, the guy sitting in front of me grabbed his carry-on and said, of course, and stormed off the plane. And you know what I thought? You make your own lunch. You make your own lunch. He was complaining to remove himself from responsibility. What do you do when you've got somebody to complain to remove themselves from responsibility? You simply ask, if it were possible, how would you do it? If it were possible, how would you do it? So tell me, the G in gripe stands for? The R stands for? The I stands for? Or brag. People complain to brag. Let me give you a great example. A buddy of mine just bought a $40,000 speedboat. Do you know how I know he just bought a $40,000 speedboat? Because he's always telling me, you'd think when you buy a $40,000 speedboat, it would come with this and it wouldn't have this, or that a $40,000 speedboat wouldn't break every time. People complain to brag. It's a way of letting you know how well they're doing, but diminishing it somewhat. People complain to inspire envy. What do you do if you've got somebody who is complaining to brag? This is actually very easy. If you've got somebody complaining to brag, you compliment the opposite. Compliment the opposite. Here's what I mean. Somebody, you're sitting there, you're ready to start a meeting, somebody looks around and goes, well, I see Tina's late again. You say, you know what I like about you, Joe? You're always on time. Compliment the opposite. It's Casual Friday. Can you see how Ed is dressed over there? You know what I love about you, Sarah? You always dress so appropriately. So you compliment the opposite, all right? So tell me again, the G stands for, the R stands for, the I stands for, and the P stands for power. You will see this in companies, you will see this in families, you will see this everywhere human beings get together. If someone is not getting along with someone else, it is a natural inclination to build an alliance against that person. How do you do it? By telling everybody why they are upsetting you, okay? People complain to have power over other people. What do you do if you've got somebody who is complaining for power? This is the easy one. This is the easy one. I was talking to somebody a little while ago, and they told me a situation that was very similar to this. I knew a sales manager who had 2 great salespeople working for him. The problem was the 2 salespeople couldn't stand each other. And they let everybody in the business know how much they didn't like each other. So what the sales manager did was he refused to get involved. And he took a deck of cards and he sat the 2 salespeople down and he started dealing cards to them. And he said, now, whenever I get to the ace of spades, whoever draws it, you're gone. And what happened was he got about halfway through the deck and the 2 salespeople grabbed the deck from him and said, can we have a moment? And that was the end of it. By the way, the ace of spades was on the bottom of the deck. Be Switzerland. As a manager, people think that your job is to take care of their issues. It's not. You send them back to talk to each other. So, tell me once again, the G in gripe stands for, the R stands for, the I stands for, the P stands for, and the E stands for excuse poor performance. What does the R stand for? I'm going to go back. Tell me one more time. Remove responsibility. Now here's remove responsibility. I'm going to give you a job. Here's a task. I want you to go do it. You start complaining to me as to all the reasons why it can't be done as a way of getting yourself off the hook before you even try. Excuse poor performance is I've given you the task, you've done it, you've blown it, now you're telling me all the reasons why it wasn't your fault. It was Myrna in accounting, it was Tom over there, Mars is in retrograde, my horoscope is wrong. You get it? Complain to excuse poor performance. When this happens, it's over with. So all you can say at this point is, how do you plan to do better next time? How do you plan to do better next time? Okay? So, let's talk about the complaint-free bracelets that you all have. There should be one on everybody's table. Let me tell you how this works. And this is actually the most powerful little thing I have ever discovered. And it works. And here's why it works. You put the bracelet on either wrist. This is not something that you wear to say, I support a complaint-free world. This is not a cause bracelet, okay? This is a tool, because every time you complain, you take the bracelet off one wrist and you put it onto the other wrist, okay? Let me see you do it. Please, everybody put your bracelet on one wrist. Everybody take your bracelet and switch it back to the other wrist. Everybody get real used to that, because you're going to change it a lot. Now here's what you're going to discover. You're going to go, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how much I complained. That's the break open. That's the point you need to get to, is to realize how much you complain. And then by switching it every day, all the time, with every complaint, you realize how much you complain, and you get to where you complain less. The goal is to go 21 consecutive days without a single complaint. Yes, there have actually been tens of thousands of people around the world who've done it. You know how they do it? They stay with it. They stay with it. It drives me crazy. So many people say, this whole complaint-free thing is a great idea. You know, but my life is really stressful. I'm going to do that when my life settles down a little bit. And I always want to say, yeah, and as soon as I get in great shape, man, I'm going to the gym. This is your tool. This is it. This is the most powerful thing I have ever seen for changing your life, because it makes you accountable to yourself. Now, here's the way it works. Right now, you're on day 1. When you switch your bracelet, you'll be on day 1. When you switch it, you're on day 1. Here's what usually happens. You're on day 1, 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 day 2, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 1. We just keep switching, and every time we do, we start over, okay? So, it's a 21 consecutive day challenge, and yes, as I said, we've had 10 million people around the world try it. Tens of thousands have succeeded. You switch your bracelet with every spoken complaint. Always stay with it. Always know what day you're on, and stay with it. Typically, it takes 4 to 8 months to succeed. Somebody was asking me, I was doing an interview in Malaysia the other day over the phone, over Skype, and somebody was asking me, well, is it good that it takes a long time? And I said, absolutely it's good that it takes a long time, because change takes time. You know that in your organizations, you know that in your own life. It takes time to change. And so this 4 to 8 month period gives you that time to change. So, this was taken a long time ago when I was much older. Never underestimate yoga and nutrition. I like to put this picture up because it's the number one question people ask me. What's Oprah like? And the answer is she's the same in person as she is on television. I want to tell you, though, it was so interesting because right after I did my little segment with her, we finished our shot, and they hadn't come to ask me to get off the stage or anything, so we were just talking, and she leaned over and said, "You did real good." And I said, "Thank you." And she said, "You know, I have nothing to complain about." And I thought, Of course not. You're Oprah Winfrey, for goodness sake. What are you going to complain about? And I guess my poker face wasn't very good because I'm sitting there with her and I'm like, really? And she said, it's not that I have everything that I have, and that's why I don't complain. Oprah said, I don't complain, and that's why I have everything I have. See, Oprah gets that she makes her own lunch, as do you. So make it a magnificent buffet and share it with the world, would you? Thank you so much for your time this morning. Thank you.